Have you ever tried looking at Earth from a completely different angle? We're used to hearing about dinosaurs, mammoths, and saber-toothed cats. But what about the monsters that time forgot? Creatures so strange that even the best scientists had to throw up their hands and admit, we can't explain this. Today, we're plunging into the world of one of the most controversial fossils ever unearthed. An animal that looked part pig, part crocodile, and part nightmare video game character. Paleontologists eventually gave it a name that stuck, the hell pig. And once you meet it, your view of the natural world may never be the same. Scientifically, it was called entelodontidae, which translates to perfect teeth. Sounds boring, right? But that tidy little name might be one of the most misleading in paleontology, because if there was anything not perfect about this animal, it was its face. A grotesque mask of bone and muscle that looked like it had been built by some mad sculptor. If you imagine fossils as belonging only to gentle giants like mammoths or delicate ancient birds, think again. Most fossils, it's true, are fairly unremarkable compared to our wildest imaginations. But sometimes something appears that makes even seasoned scientists scratch their heads and whisper, "What on earth is this?" Ah, that was the reaction to the entelodonts. We're talking about an extinct family of beasts that roamed between about 45 and 19 million years ago, spreading across North America, Asia, and Europe. They appeared after the age of dinosaurs, but long before mammoths and saber-toothed cats claimed their thrones. Think of them as the final bosses of the pre-mammoth world. And yes, their name really does mean perfect teeth. That sterile scientific label came simply from their full dental set, a primitive formula of 3 incisors, 1 canine, 4 premolars, and 3 molars on each side of both jaws. But how did an animal with such a technical, lab-sounding name end up being called the hell pig or the Terminator pig? The answer lies in history, because the story of the entelodonts isn't just about a beast, it's about a rivalry. 2 of the most famous paleontologists of the 19th century, Edward Drinker Cope and Othniel Charles Marsh, were locked in a furious competition known as the Bone Wars. They weren't just digging for fossils. They were sabotaging each other's digs, smearing each other's reputations, and even hiring gun-toting cowboys to steal fossils from one another. And it was right in the middle of this scientific feud that the first fragments of entelodont bones surfaced. At first, the fossils were only scraps, jaws, odd skull pieces, a handful of teeth. Scientists stared in confusion. The teeth looked pig-like, but the skull was enormous, decorated with bizarre bony knobs. Trying to fit it into the tree of life was like forcing a crocodile puzzle piece into a jigsaw of a pig. Nothing fit. It took years, and the discovery of more complete skeletons, especially at the Agate Fossil Beds in Nebraska, for the picture to come together. And when paleontologists finally saw the assembled form, jaws dropped. This wasn't a pig. This wasn't anything familiar. This was a monster. And that is how the nickname Hell Pig was born. It's almost poetic that such a terrifying creature was uncovered during one of the most dramatic scientific rivalries in history. It's as if even the fossils themselves knew how to play up the drama. Entelodon, the forerunner. We begin with Entelodon, the namesake of the entire family. First discovered in Europe in the 19th century, its fossils were far smaller than its later relatives, comparable in size to a modern wild boar. At first, paleontologists were baffled. They couldn't decide if it was a pig, a hippo, or some entirely unknown mammal. The discovery of Entelodon shattered expectations. It was proof of a now extinct branch of even-toed ungulates, combining features that seemed stitched together from multiple species. The name Entelodontidae, perfect teeth, was chosen simply to highlight one standout trait, not to capture the grotesque whole of these animals. Archaeotherium, the first predator. Next, let's travel to North America to meet Archaeotherium, one of the most widespread and successful entelodonts. By this stage, they had grown larger, reaching the size of a small cow, and developed prominent bony swellings on their faces. This was a sign they were evolving into true apex predators. Fossil evidence of Archaeotherium is abundant. Scientists have found specimens with healed bone fractures, revealing they were aggressive animals, constantly fighting among themselves. Some paleontologists suggest these facial protrusions acted like prehistoric boxing gloves, cushioning blows in violent clashes over territory or mates. Daeodon, the apex destroyer. And finally, the star of our story, Daeodon. The largest of all entelodonts, it grew to the size of a small rhinoceros, the ultimate product of entelodont evolution, a living engine of destruction. When you think of pigs, you probably imagine round, slow, mud-snouted farm animals. Forget that image entirely. Entelodonts were the max-level version of that concept. The giant Daeodon could stand up to 6 feet tall at the shoulder and weigh over 1,600 pounds, rivaling a massive bison or a Clydesdale horse. But what made them truly terrifying was not just their bulk, it was their heads. Those heads were oversized, taking up between 35 to 45% of their total body length. And they weren't just big, they were bizarrely ornamented. Their skulls carried grotesque bony flanges, with massive cheekbone outgrowths and small knobby tubercles along the lower jaw. For decades, scientists debated their function. Were they anchor points for jaw muscles, boosting bite force, or protective armor in combat? The most likely answer, both. Fossil skulls often show healed bite marks, almost certainly from battles with their own kind. These bony growths worked as natural armor, allowing entelodonts to clash head-to-head in brutal jaw, wrestling matches, much like modern hippos. They may also have served as dominance displays or mate-attracting features during breeding season. But beneath that monstrous exterior was another twist. Despite their massive heads, their brains were surprisingly small. Raw intelligence wasn't their strength. Instead, they had another superpower, an extraordinary sense of smell. With it, they could detect food from miles away, whether fresh prey or a rotting carcass. And unlike most even-toed ungulates, their eyes faced more forward, suggesting binocular vision, the hallmark of a predator. Picture an entelodont with jaws that could gape more than 100 degrees seen in Archaeotherium, lined with fearsome fangs. It's natural to assume they were bloodthirsty killers. Many scientists once believed exactly that, imagining them as specialized bone crushers like hyenas, tearing apart carcasses to reach the marrow. But science rarely leaves us with simple answers. Modern microscopic wear analysis of their tooth enamel tells a more surprising, almost endearing story. When researchers compared the microscopic scratches and pits on entelodont teeth with those of living animals, the closest match wasn't lions or hyenas. It was the humble, modern, wild boar. That's right. Rather than being bloodthirsty destroyers, entelodonts were actually gigantic omnivores. Their diet was surprisingly varied. Much like modern wild boars, roots, tubers, insects, small mammals, and even carrion. Their ability to crush bone wasn't for specialized predation, but rather for efficiency, ensuring no nutrient went to waste, whether from a carcass or a freshly caught animal. In other words, they were heavyweight opportunists, willing to consume anything they could get their jaws on. Some studies even suggest they may have decapitated prey, eating only the hindquarters. A grim but complex feeding strategy. By now, you can probably picture them. A supercharged version of a wild boar with an oversized head, bone-crushing jaws, and a tendency for brutal jaw-to-jaw duel. Everything about them screams pig, only scaled up to monstrous proportions. But here's the twist. Scientists eventually discovered that entelodonts weren't pigs at all. Despite superficial similarities in body shape, deeper anatomical studies and genetic evidence revealed a much more distant connection. Their closest living relatives today are not pigs, but hippos and whales. Entelodonts belong to a branch of evolution just outside the group known as whippomorphs, which unites hippos and whales. This is one of evolution's strangest surprises. A fully land-dwelling hell pig, savage in appearance, turns out to be kin to both a semi-aquatic grazer and the largest creatures ever to roam the oceans. It proves that evolution doesn't always follow a straight, predictable path. Species often develop similar traits independently as they adapt to comparable environments, a process called convergent evolution. Think about it. Sharks, dolphins, and the extinct ichthyosaurs all evolved sleek, torpedo-shaped bodies built for speed in water, despite being fish, mammals, and reptiles. Or consider the camera-style eyes of humans and octopuses. Both are highly advanced, yet they evolved entirely separately. In fact, our eyes have a blind spot where the optic nerve passes through, but an octopus's eyes do not. Another example, the echolocation abilities of bats and dolphins. Both evolved the same genetic adaptations for sonar-like navigation, despite being worlds apart. So the fact that entelodonts looked and behaved like pigs, but were not pigs at all, is just another one of evolution's mischievous jokes. But here's the real question. How could such a massive, adaptable, nearly unbeatable creature? Entelodonts reigned for millions of years, but then the Earth shifted. The climate grew cooler and drier. Vast ancient forests gave way to sweeping grasslands. At the same time, smarter and more specialized carnivores began to rise. Chief among them were the bear dogs, or amphicyonids. Like Amphicyon, it was a lopsided matchup. On one side, the mighty Daeodon, a hulking ambush predator with a small brain and a reliance on brute force. On the other, the agile bear dogs, capable of hunting in packs and employing complex strategies to bring down large, powerful prey. The difference in hunting tactics was critical. Entelodonts likely relied on stealth and raw power, launching devastating ambushes. Bear dogs, by contrast, could cooperate, exhaust larger prey through teamwork, and share resources within the pack. Pack living offered advantages beyond hunting, shared food, communal care of young, and greater adaptability. Entelodonts, with their limited intelligence, simply couldn't compete with that level of sophistication. They were solitary warriors in a world increasingly dominated by cooperative hunters. And so, after nearly 20 million years of dominance, the empire of the hell pigs collapsed. These seemingly invincible beasts couldn't outlast the smarter, faster, and more organized predators, nor the environmental upheavals reshaping their world. The story of the entelodonts is one of the most astonishing chapters in the ancient world. It reminds us that a so-called monster is not always what we imagine. They were branded hell pigs, yet in reality they were simply giant, opportunistic omnivores. Long assumed to be close relatives of pigs, their true evolutionary ties are with hippos and whales. And in the end, they weren't toppled by a stronger beast, but by rivals that were smarter, swifter, and better suited to a changing Earth. These bones are more than the remains of an extinct animal. They are living stories, tales of survival, of fierce competition, of a planet constantly reshaping itself. They are mysteries, waiting for science to unlock. The tale of the entelodonts also reveals something greater. For all the progress we've made, science still surprises us with its playful twists and endless puzzles. A terrifying creature nicknamed the hell pig turns out to share kinship with the gentle whale. A ruler of its age carried a brain too small to keep pace with the shifting world. Fossils are not just dry relics, they are nature's riddles etched in stone. And every time we solve one, the past throws 10 more our way. That is the beauty of science. It never rests, it never stops questioning. Thank you for journeying with me through the strange and forgotten world of these ancient beasts. If you enjoy stories of creatures that time has left behind, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss what's coming next. So, what do you think of the hell pig now that you know the truth? Do they truly deserve that fearsome nickname? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and hit subscribe to uncover more of prehistory's mysteries. See you in the next adventure.